Would it be wrong to say Resident Evil caused the horror game market to become more mainstream? It essentially did to horror games what Halloween did to horror films. You can look back on horror movies pre-1978 and a lot of them are honestly pretty tame. Hell, Halloween practically invented and defined the slasher subgenre, as before that, all it really had was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, and I guess at a stretch, Psycho. Horror games have a similar situation, as before Resident Evil defined the survival horror subgenre, all we really had was a bunch of point-and-click horror titles such as the surprisingly tricky Uninvited, and a little game called Clock Tower. Well, not quite what we know as Clock Tower in the West, it's actually Clock Tower 2, as the first game was Japan exclusive for the Super Famicom. Luckily for us, we got a PS1 re-release called Clock Tower, The First Fear, but I'm just gonna call it Clock Tower because that's easy to say. Anyways, Clock Tower follows the story of an orphan named Jennifer Simpson, who is adopted along with a group of her friends by a wealthy recluse known as Simon Barrows, and is taken to live at his estate, the titular Clock Tower. Sounds like nothing could possibly go wrong, right? Unsurprisingly, it did, and upon hearing a scream and going to investigate, Jennifer discovers the dead body of one of her friends and finds herself hunted by the iconic Scissor Man, a deformed boy wielding a gigantic pair of shears. From there, it's up to Jennifer to save her remaining friends and uncover the secrets of the Baron's estate, all whilst desperately avoiding a shear-wielding maniac who wants nothing more than to kill her. For a 2D point-and-click horror game released in 1995, this game is surprisingly freaky. Hell, I'd say it's even more unsettling than a good number of games released nowadays. You rarely know what's going on, and you're completely defenseless for the most part. Like a character in a slasher movie, once you see the crazed killer, there's no fighting back. All you can do is run. These pseudo jump scares are honestly quite effective. You can be making good progress, solve a tricky puzzle, you turn to leave, and boom! Scissor Man on the other side of the door. I'll admit there were more than a few times where I wasn't expecting that and it took me by surprise. And despite lacking voice acting, the game's presentation does a pretty damn good job adding to the tense atmosphere. Jennifer's character model and dialogue portrait is surprisingly capable of showing a range of emotion, although you're going to only be seeing her be scared for the most part. The soundtrack also helps too, most of it being dreary ambient music, but suddenly switching to this incredibly tense track whenever the Scissor Man shows up. I'm honestly disappointed this series fell into relative obscurity. I'd love to see a re-release or remake one day.